He wanted to make Vegas his own.
We think we'll be capable of at least 50 miles an hour.
Since the 1940s, Howard Hughes had made a name for himself as the world's most fascinating billionaire.
Yes, after breakfast.
The definition of a Renaissance man, this debonair playboy spearheaded giant corporations, flew and designed aircraft, even carved a name for himself as a Hollywood studio boss, with a reputation for seducing the silver screen's most sought-after starlets. Actress Terry Moore was among his many conquests.
He arranged a accidental meeting, which I didn't know for 10 years that it wasn't an accident. He brought out the maternal in a woman. He was a big baby. He had a way of really making you feel sorry for him.
Brilliant, handsome, and rich, Hughes was known as a paranoid, unpredictable eccentric who seemed to think that ordinary rules didn't apply to him. At one point, he secreted 4 different starlets in 4 different Las Vegas hotels, expecting none would find out about the other 3. But Howard Hughes had a secret, one shared by only a select handful of people. A head injury from a plane crash, plus a bout of syphilis contracted in youth, were gradually driving the billionaire into madness. Both his body and his mind were deteriorating, and Hughes was determined to keep his condition hidden from the world. He chose ex-FBI agent Robert Mayhew to be his public representative.
When I agreed to being his alter ego, maybe I made a serious mistake as far as his world was concerned. It enabled him the luxury of going into a cocoon. With the progression of time, it was very, very difficult for him to understand reality as, in fact, it was in the outside world.
On Thanksgiving Eve 1966, Howard Hughes and his entourage of Mormon bodyguards descended on Las Vegas and moved into the penthouse floor of the Desert Inn Hotel. They announced they would be staying for 10 days. But several months later, hotel management told Robert Mayhew in no uncertain terms that they wanted Hughes and company out.
The owners of the hotel took stock of it and said, what do we care about room rent? We're in the business of retaining money from gambling, so it's really a lost revenue for us. He then asked them for a price for the acquisition of the hotel. They gave him one, which they thought was inflated, and he paid it.
Many of the properties that Hughes was buying belonged to the old guard, the Vegas mob godfathers. With surprising eagerness, they turned over their holdings to the billionaire.
The boys were selling out, you know, they were getting out 1 at a time, 2 at a time, 6 at a time, you know.
The mob began to sell out for a lot of reasons. First, they'd been under a tremendous amount of heat ever since 1951 in the Kefauver hearings. These guys couldn't get a minute apiece. Second thing is they were getting old. A lot of them were getting old, and it wasn't worth the hassle. And so here came somebody who could clear them out of it and who would give them an enormous profit. So when they saw Howard Hughes coming, they must have regarded him as the quintessential sucker.
Howard Hughes is the washing machine. In the public's mind, Howard Hughes wiped out the mob, kicked the mob out of the casino business, and he has now taken over the casino business. In truth, that's not quite what happened. And remember, the casinos are run by the men who run the casinos, not by Howard Hughes and his 7 Mormons up there in the penthouse. They never went down. They didn't know what was going on. So in a lot of those casinos, skimming continued. Wise guys still managed to get their girlfriends comped. But publicly, I think from a public relations point of view, it was a tremendous help to the casino business and to Las Vegas as a whole.
By 1969, partly due to Hughes' influence, gaming license regulations changed so that public corporations could indeed own casinos. It was the beginning of a new era, the age of corporate Las Vegas. But not everyone in town was happy about the changes.
Vegas, when I knew it, from 1946 on to, let's say, 1970, something like that, I thought was the most wonderful place in the world. When it was taken over by Hughes and all that, it became a factory.
Hughes brought with it, bookkeepers and, and eye in the sky. Everybody was watching everybody else. There was a very uncomfortable feeling going around. But the legend was that every room was bugged. And he was listening into everyone. And I used to go in the dressing room and say, Howard, it's Alan here. Howard, you hear me, Howard?
Some of his demands were not reasonable. Unfortunately, I was not aware the extent to which he was dependent on drugs. I felt very bad for this man, though, because I knew that he had an entourage that was encouraging his lack of decision, because it made them more powerful. But I thought I could control it as long as he and I could talk. But I did not make arrangements, stupidly on my part, for the day that he was too sick to communicate with me. That's precisely what happened.
On Thanksgiving Day, 1970, Hughes' power-hungry entourage mysteriously removed the critically ill man from the Desert Inn. The richest man in the world was suddenly a missing person.
There's no doubt in my mind that that decision was made because they wanted to make sure that they were in control of Howard Hughes. At that point, I was fired. I was the last window to the world that Hughes had.
Howard Hughes spent his remaining years sequestered away in the Bahamas. By 1976, he was dead, his wasted corpse unrecognizable from the dashing young man who had taken the business world by storm.
It was terrible. A man, the same man now who created the biggest medical foundation in the world, delivered back to this country with sores all over his body, with broken hypodermic needles in his arm, with holes where teeth should have been. When I read that, I cried like a baby. Am I saying that they killed him? If sheer, complete neglect qualifies as a weapon, the answer is yes.
After his death, the Hughes Corporation passed into the hands of a capable relative, William Lummis, who decided to sell off Hughes' holdings in the gaming industry at enormous profits. And to this day, Hughes Suma Corporation is one of the 3 largest landowners in the Las Vegas Valley. Howard Hughes had been a visionary. From behind the darkened windows of his penthouse retreat, he looked out on the desert and saw its unlimited potential. But the limitations of his mind and body kept him from truly leaving his mark.
There were so many times that he'd say to me, because I'd have to go somewhere to represent him, where he'd say to me, how I wish I could have been there. And I'd say, Howard, damn it,